Welcome, everyone, to the City Council work session. Or, what day is it? It's February 8th.
All day long?
All day long.
Yeah, I can see.
Welcome, everyone at home and here. And we have a motion on the table. Would you like to read that motion, please?
Certainly. So the motion that Councillor Pauling made last week, I think it was, 2 weeks ago, I move to direct the city manager to prepare for council discussion a draft of an amendment to the downtown urban renewal plan. The draft amendment should include as possible projects: 1, high-speed fiber; 2, downtown parks block/open spaces; and 3, a year-round farmers market. The draft amendment also should be made contingent on approval by the voters at the November election.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask first if George Pauling would like to say something since it's his motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly, there's a number of reasons why I put that motion out. And is this working today? I think it is. One of the first reasons is I think it would be to our disadvantage to lose one of the many tools we have available to us for funding options for 3 projects that take in a considerable amount of area in the downtown. And with the deadline coming up for the expiration of the downtown urban renewal district, I just thought it would be best to get that process started and have that discussion. So if we decide to go that way, we have the downtown urban renewal district available for funding. In looking at all the different funding options available, we don't have to fund all 3 of those projects with strictly from the downtown urban renewal fund. I mean, we can use a combination of different funds. It's just that this is just another tool available to us. So that's the reason why I put that out there. And I think it's a valuable tool. And in reading some of the information that we got in our packet, it actually looks like that some of the funding that currently goes to the school districts will actually be decreased if the urban renewal district goes away because of the way the state figures out its funding sources according to the information that we got. So that's where I am on that right now.
Okay, George Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. We can vote on this thing, but I think we should do it at the end of this work session. We still haven't had a full discussion. I have several questions about just the basic plan.
Well, why don't you go ahead, George, and then I'll just keep get those questions out.
Well, this motion is a way to fund the fiber optic project. We haven't had a full discussion yet about all the other alternatives. And I'm not saying I would prefer that we didn't vote on this motion, but I think that there's a desire to do so. So I think, okay, that's fine. We can do that. I'm asking that we save a vote on this motion till the end of the work session so that we have an hour and a half to examine all the other options. Because I've come up with a very rough plan of how we can do this. And I'd like to run that by. I would have said it normally on an email to everybody before, but I worked on it all weekend and all day today. So I think it's really premature to vote on this one funding source without examining all the other ones. And if we had an hour and a half to do that, we could go over that. And if people weren't convinced and they thought this was the best way to go, that's fine. We can vote on it at the end of the meeting. We'll carve out time for that. I would prefer that if we are going to do that we would wait till Wednesday because we're scheduled for half a work session on Wednesday on the downtown improvements. So to vote on it right now is we're closing off discussion of all the other options. And that would really be foolish to do that, I believe, because I think there's many other viable ways to pay for the fiber project in the study area. Thank you.
Mike Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. I brought my initial motion, in December and attached these things because I thought that it was the best way for us to get something done quickly that I think needs to be done quickly, and that is to to have the fiber installation that it seems like a majority support done as quickly as possible so that the city and frankly the tech sector could reap the most benefit from it being done quickly. But that was too quickly, obviously, for many folks, and that's fine. I still want to see that part of it not have to wait a year or two or more to get started. I'd like to see it get started a lot sooner than that. But at the same time, I think we should move more deliberately on each piece here. I hear that there's many other ways we could package something together that would bring us all of these options for improvement downtown in a way that we can afford it, but cobbling together the best option that provides for the most number of people to support is kind of the tricky part here. And I'd like to give the manager and the staff the opportunity to cobble that together and bring back to us the plan for how to move forward and have them bring that plan back as quickly as possible, but in how they would suggest we do all of these things with each individual funding piece. And so I guess I will offer to make a friendly amendment to George's motion that we remove the part that says send to the ballot in November, because we don't know that yet. We don't know that that's the wisest way to proceed yet, I don't think, until we have an opportunity to hear more from the staff on it. So I would offer a friendly amendment that takes that piece out and asks then the staff to come back to us with the best package of funding options, which may include the Downtown Urban Renewal District, and at that time that would serve as a recommendation for how to start that process so that we don't lose any options to say no along the way, if that meets with George's approval.
I'll accept that as a friendly.
So it changed it so much, I wanted to know if that's within the...
Well, I need to know who made the second for
I think I
George's
did.
motion. So if Mike made the second and so the maker and the seconder agree, then it can be a friendly, and so it could remove that. We can talk whenever you want about how that adjusts the timing of things.
Okay. You want to
So what got removed?
Send it to the November ballot off and have the manager come back to us with the best recommendation of funding package for these things. That way, it may be that's a part of how we want to move forward. And he will then have the opportunity to tell us the step-by-step process to start that.
Okay, so you've accepted that. Okay. So I've got in the queue Greg, Claire, Chris, Alan, second go-round, George Poling, and George Brown. Greg.
You know, there's also at least one other proposal for investment in projects using the Urban Renewal District, and that is the refurbishing or redevelopment of the old downtown LCC Center. And I know that is something that has percolated to the top as well. So I don't know if it would be appropriate to add that to George's motion or not at this point. But, you know, I just want, as point of clarification, we're giving staff direction. We're not, you know, prescribing any particular course of action in terms of how we are going to proceed with, you know, extending the Urban Renewal District, not extending the Urban Renewal District. We're giving direction to staff to do due diligence around giving us the best set of options to come back with this as being the kind of the precursor of framing that particular way to go. So, you know, I would like to see that, and, you know, if I have to vote on it at some point in the terms of an action, I'll recuse myself of it if there's an LCC part in that. But I do think that it's important that we can put into a package viable, you know, projects that could enhance the entire downtown corridor, and that would be one. And I don't know if George would be amenable. I don't know how we would do that in terms of a friendly amendment, but, I would like to propose that as a friendly amendment to George and Mike's.
You're asking him to add it as a friendly.
Yeah.
George?
Just some clarification. The motion is to start the process.
Exactly.
The motion is not to vote on this, and that between this point and down at the time we vote on extending, we'll have a hearing in front of the Planning Commission as well as the council. Is that correct?
The Planning Commission can choose to have a public hearing. When I spoke to you last time about it, I said they would. It's actually optional for the Planning Commission. It's mandatory for the council. So there will, at a minimum, be a public hearing before the City Council. There will be a recommendation from the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission can choose to hold a public hearing or get other input if it wants.
I'll go ahead and accept it as a friendly.
Clarification. Is this on? Go ahead.
So you're on.
You'll recuse yourself if I accept this. Is that correct?
Well, I would say I would have to recuse myself.
So you don't.
Or ask the attorney,
So at this point, Greg, I would advise you to state explicitly what you're assuming most people know, who your employer is.
Exactly.
That creates a potential conflict, because even if this becomes part of the motion and the motion passes for reasons you all have already said, this is not voting to adopt an urban renewal plan amendment. This is to say, staff, bring us back something, which creates a potential conflict, not an actual conflict.
Right. So at this point, I would not have to recuse myself, only if it would move forward into the next phase of action after.
I'll need to look at that one, and I'll advise you on that. But at this point, I would advise you just to state for the record who your employer is and why this creates the potential conflict for you.
My employer is Lane Community College, and it could potentially create a conflict based upon my relationship with my employer for this particular amendment.
Right, and the possibility that LCC would financially benefit.
Exactly.
So I don't. So you've now declared that conflict. So you're fine to participate and vote today. Mike still hasn't said whether he accepts.
One last clarification then is, what we're directing you to do is to come back to us with the plan that we could elect at that future point to remove parts or add parts after you give us the specifics you would recommend. Is that correct?
Correct. The adding parts I'll need to talk about a little bit later, but definitely what you would be directing us to do now is to prepare something for your consideration. You can scrap the whole thing. You can revise it. At certain points in the process, you can add to it. But at the very end of the process, where it's now time for you to vote on the ordinance, if you said, we want to add another project and it's going to be $12 million, I'd advise you at that point, it's too late because you've already gone through the entire public process. But certainly for the next couple work sessions that you would have on this, you can revise, remove, add. But it's better to give us all the possibilities that you can think of now and then take things away rather than bring things up later on that's going to add possibly more debt at that point.
I would like to be in the queue because I have one of those, but I would be happy to accept that because that brings more of us together in the conversation.
Okay, Claire?
Thank you. So, I'm fine with Councilor Brown's request that we don't take a vote till we've had a fuller discussion. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we have an opportunity to vet a few different ideas before landing on the best choices. And as the addition that Greg just brought up of the LCC downtown building, we might have other things for downtown that haven't yet surfaced at this table that we might want to consider if, in fact, urban renewal is the right tool for those particular items. For example, at some point, if we continue with this conversation on urban renewal, I might want to look at funding for more benches downtown, enhanced lighting in certain areas, and those kinds of things that we've talked about very generally. Right now, I do still think that urban renewal seems like a good tool, but it's not our only possibility. So I'm definitely interested in a deeper conversation about potential ways to fund the fiber optic network, as well as the park blocks and other things that might seem appropriate. I do think there's a sense of urgency, so I do want us to keep going forward, but I see us doing that. So I'll keep the discussion going.
All right. Chris?
I like where the conversation's going, particularly because we've stepped back from making a definitive choice that locks us in, and we've kind of expanded that. Thank you for accepting. Thank you for the ideas. Because I, too, want to make sure that if we do act, we act with something that we can go forward with, and it doesn't leave us with a lot of question marks. And so whether we do it now or at the end of the meeting, it would be nice to hear the conversation. I think we should act today. Because I think we're at a point where we've got something that I can go along with. I think it's good. What I like about it is it doesn't set an election. It doesn't set a definitive date. It says bring us back some information that's moving in this direction. It provides clear direction of what we're trying to accomplish, and to me that's always important. But it doesn't limit us, because I think fiber, park blocks, year-round farmers market. I also like the LCC idea. I like the amenities idea. We've already come up with 2 just sitting here. There may be 1 or 2 more. So I'm hopeful that if we should pass this in its revised form, that it would provide us the opportunity to get to what those additional things might be as quickly as possible. Because I would rather take away than add. I think adding is always problematic if you do it later on. But if we start a list, we need to make sure the list is complete. So I appreciate the progress we've made so far. Thanks, George, for getting us this far. I think the amendments have made it even better and more clear by not nailing us down. But I do think we want to provide a sense that we are interested in looking and continuing to look at the downtown development district as a funding option. We're not cutting that off. We haven't decided exactly what it's going to pay for or not pay for, but we're still willing to look at it as a part of the overall package for funding, not the only package, but the overall package.
Alan?
Yeah, my major problem with the downtown urban renewal district extension is as a matter of integrity. When I voted back in 2010, and I realized some of the councilors weren't at the table, and then namely Claire and Greg, that the intent of the council was not to extend the downtown urban renewal district. When I made that vote, I meant it, and the language could not have been clearer. The language is unambiguous. And it doesn't sit right with me that 5 years later we'd say, well, that didn't mean anything, it didn't mean that, and even though what we said was what we thought at the time, and it calls into question any time, and this would provide a vivid example for anybody who wanted to make this argument, that the fact that our word really doesn't mean anything, that we say one thing and then time passes and we do something completely the opposite, even though we voted for it and said that's what we meant, and made it explicitly clear. And I don't buy the argument that things have so substantially changed that this merits a review of that decision. The high-speed fiber project in particular and the park blocks project are very good projects, and I support them and want to see them move forward. But they're not so different from all the ideas that have been floating around for the last couple of years. So nothing's really changed. It's just a matter of whether or not we really meant what we said when we said we weren't going to extend the urban renewal district, especially when there are other viable funding mechanisms that could fund the high-speed fiber project, the farmers market, and the park blocks renewal. In no instances should we do this without a vote of the extension of the urban renewal district downtown without a vote of public. I think that goes right in the face of our public trust issue that we would create with the public. With that said, I'm curious, George, what you had in mind, and I think you're next
Betty's
or coming up.
Yeah.
But could you go over the other funding options that are available? And there's some new information that's been put forward, in particular the levy, grants, telecom, private funding that are available for these particular projects.
For the fiber project particularly, or?
Yeah. Well, yes. To start with, why don't you start there?
Okay. It's really local, state, federal, private. I think those are all in the mix. We've talked about urban renewal actually, and there's some of the area that's in the downtown district, some of the fiber area the planning area is in the riverfront district, some is in neither one of those. So there might be riverfront and downtown urban renewal if that's in play or not. The state funds, we've been having some conversations with the state. We're talking about a $500,000 potential grant opportunity with the state. The federal funds most likely would come through EDA. And, the target amount that we're looking at and had some conversations is about $1.2 million. But there's a lot of contingencies, whether we're eligible, whether we meet the criteria and all of those things. So it's a little uncertain. The EDA, the Economic Development Administration, federal.
Department of Commerce.
And then there's private funds, what portion of this project maybe could be paid for privately. I think those are really the major sources that we're looking at. And, depending on whether urban or downtown urban renewal is in that equation or not, if it's not, then we kind of go down a different path and start looking at some other options for general fund, telecom funds. We've talked about all of those kinds of mix. So it really is a grab bag of different sources depending on urban renewal, depending on federal grants, depending on state grants. So we have some work to do, and we're looking at different refunding strategies that we could start now in hopes that we could pay for it over time, for example.
How much of the telecom fund would be available? Or is that?
That'd be my question. Excellent.
I don't know that that's a specific number, but I think Christy's here maybe.
Hi, Christy Hammond, Central Services Director. We would have about $600,000 available from this year's funds and funds dedicated for project resources for next year. So we usually dedicate about $300,000 a year to assign to specific projects.
And then a levy, of course, is available for this as well, correct? But it would require a vote of the people for any remaining part. But at some point, a levy doesn't make sense to do because it'd be too expensive if we're only in for like $500,000. So if you carefully pulled together all these different sources and put together a package, as opposed to cobble them together, then you could fund, then a levy might not make sense, right?
Right.
Because it's too expensive to do.
Betty?
Maybe we need a
Thank you. I won't vote for anything that is even planning to think about extending urban renewal. We should let it die. We said we were going to. I think Alan said it very well. If this could last forever, there will always be more things that need to be done that will never end. And I think it's time to look for other sources of money, and including the money that will come back to us when we don't have it being diverted to urban renewal. It will be part of the money we can use. People say, well, it's only one step. Well, I don't think we should take a step toward a destination that we don't want to reach. There's no point to that. So I will vote against whatever motion this is if it involves a step toward extending urban renewal, which we promised we wouldn't do. Thank you.
Second round, George Polling?
Yeah, I don't want us to get too wrapped up in the discussion about the urban renewal district being used at this point in the conversation because, again, this is just a motion to start the process. What ultimately I'd like to see us do is cobble together a funding package that creates the least impact to the taxpayers. What do we have available out there that's not going to cause an increase in their tax rate? Urban Renewal District is one of them. As far as if it district went away and the money coming back to us, it'll go back into the general fund, and we already know there are people lining up for their special projects to ask for more money from the general fund at our next budget cycle. So I don't think we'll see any of that money being used to help, improve the park blocks or the farmers market. And to Alan's comments about public trust and our integrity and our word, I don't want to bring up bad memories, but that ship sailed many years ago, Alan.
George Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. There's this motion is still all messed up, and it's getting more complicated as time goes by. It still has amending the downtown urban renewal plan as the main suggestion. It doesn't really specifically direct manager and staff to come back with all the other funding options. I don't believe. Perhaps the city attorney could read the motion as it stands now.
So there was a friendly amendment in addition to what was in George's motion, minus the part about the election, there was a friendly amendment to also direct staff, in addition to preparing a draft urban renewal plan amendment, to bring back other recommendations for other funding sources for this, for whatever winds up in the motion, which right now would be the high-speed fiber, downtown park blocks, open spaces, year-round farmers market, and redevelopment of the LCC building.
Okay, thank you.
So if the motion passes the way it is, in addition to starting work on a plan amendment, we would also work on other options to put together some kind of funding package for you to consider.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I think it's a really big mistake to take the referral to the ballot out of this motion. I think that's essential because basically if council chooses that option amongst all the others, which I think are much more viable and make much more sense, then we will, we're going to lose public trust that way because we're going to be doing something that we almost swore on a stack of Bibles to people that we were not going to do. I remember those discussions, and manager and staff and the council were pretty clear that they weren't going to, this would be the last time. All right. So I think that should go back on there. It's good that it has, examining the other options. So my question now is, if council chooses that option and we decide not to refer it to the ballot, I think we're going to be in big time trouble. So when is the last date that this could be referred to the ballot? The council could refer it.
So if the
the majority of council decides to amend the downtown urban renewal district plan.
Glad you asked that. Depending on what you do with whether to include the election now or sometime in the near future or not, if the council refers it, then you would need to act by July 25th to adopt the urban renewal plan amendment that would include a referral, and then it would still get onto the November ballot. If you do not include, if you're not going to refer it to the ballot, then you would want to act by June 13th, because that would then give people the 30 days to collect signatures, and if they collect the signatures, then it would still get on the November ballot. If you didn't act until after June 13th, without it being a referral, then if people collected the signatures, it would not be on the November ballot, and it would not go into effect. And so
if we acted after June 13th.
Right. If you took final action in July without the referral, and then the voters, collected the necessary signatures to refer it, that would be too late to get it onto the November ballot.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to include the referral, then you would want to act by June 13th. If you are going to include the referral, you don't need to act until July 25th. If you're not sure what you're going to do, then we will proceed to meet the June 13th date, so you would still have that option, but that also means you'll have to do things more quickly at the front end because we won't have as much time at the back end.
Okay. Yeah, well, this is something I think we as a council need to think about. If we go ahead and refer this, or if we don't, but let's say it makes it to the ballot. Let's say it fails. I think there's a very good chance it might fail. Then what? It sets back everything else. It sets back the fiber optic project. It sets back any parks, blocks improvements. It sets everything back, and we kind of have to start all over again. So I think that's the worst possible option. I think there's much better options, and I think I'm finished with my comments on this one. Then maybe we can start talking about all the other options. Thank you.
I've got Mike in the queue, but before I call on Mike, George, so maybe you could think about the options that you've already seen mentioned, and if there are others that you want them to have to take into consideration, get them out on the. I'm not asking for you to answer right now. I'm just suggesting to you that you will come around the next. All right. So the next round. There was something else. The other comment I want to make is, and I'll probably keep doing this as we go through this, is that I don't want the public to think that should we this fail, that we're not going to pursue the things that we are want to get done. It'll probably be slower. It'll be more arduous to do it, but the intention would still be keep moving in that direction. Unless you give guidance otherwise, we would still be pursuing broadband, and we would still be pursuing park blocks and these other things that you've expressed thus far interest in us doing. We just wouldn't be doing them in the way that has been set forward thus far. But I think it's really important for the public not to think that we're saying if you don't support this through your vote, then we're not going to do it, because that is not the intention, at least as you have laid it out at this point. Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I would also say that it's important for the public to understand that this motion today doesn't remove the possibility that we may see the wisdom of George Brown's argument and refer this out to the ballot. We still retain that option with this motion. We still can later, after we hear the presentation from the staff on their recommended actions, and that's good. I would say that as a part of the funding package, there are two pieces that are important for me for staff to take note of. Number one is that I'm absolutely fine with the idea that private partners pay a portion of this. I think that's as it should be. And those that benefit from it, I would not want to see it, however, done through DEI. And the reason is, as you know, is because the folks who are members of DEI can decide to close DEI anytime they want to, and I think this might be a reason why they would consider that decision. So I wouldn't want to do it through that. But the participants should have a way to to pay for a portion of the capital cost as well. The other thing that I would say is that I hope we don't use telecom funds. I hope to have a future discussion about something else that I hope, if I believe will qualify for the use of that, that I would like to see us do, and that's to bury the lines out Willamette. I think that after having talked to a lot of people out there, and once we get into the community conversations around what will happen in the development of South Willamette, I think we will find that a good many of the people there would prefer that we bury the power lines and give the opportunity for wider sidewalks and for a different kind of livability out that street. And if we have the capacity to use telecom funds to do a part of that work, I think that would be wise. I would have joined that to this in some way, but it's just too far out of downtown for us to do it. But I wish we could have those conversations in parallel. But again, I would, if we use telecom funds, I'm going to want to have that conversation about that as well, because I'd like to have that at some point after. Thank you.
Claire, and then Chris, and then George Brown, round 3.
Thanks. So I'm still agnostic on which funding method we might use for these projects, and I encourage Councillor Brown to speak to some of his ideas during this work session. But I do think if we need to make a definite commitment to finding funding if we decide not to go with the urban renewal, if we go for some of these other a little bit here, a little bit there. General fund, as Councilor Polling pointed out, we'll have a lot of folks who have different ideas for how we use our general fund. So I really want us to make a commitment to funding this one way or the other. I also think if we decide not to extend the Urban Renewal District, I recommend we just keep the farmers market piece in the district as it sits now and not make any changes to it and not necessarily worry about putting the farmers market into another funding source. We just leave that placeholder where it is. I definitely appreciate the commitment of those councilors who were on this body when they voted to end the district, but I also have a critique of that choice to bind a future council to end a program that has the potential for a positive impact at a lower cost to taxpayers throughout the city. I'm not saying that's the facts. I'm saying there's a potential for that. So that's part of the reason I really want us to vet these other ideas. I recall another time when the council kept a promise to end the library levy. I was serving on the budget committee at the time, and I admired the fact that the council chose to say, we said we weren't going to renew this levy and we're not going to renew it, and pretty much the next week the recession hit us very hard, and we ended up having to cut library services and spending a lot of energy and time and just recently commitment to pass a renewed levy to fill the budget gap. So there is value in keeping a promise, but we need to recognize that it may come at a cost to taxpayers that might not have been anticipated at the time. So I think we need to be honest about that. I definitely would like to hear more about the other funding options that we might proceed that won't be potentially turned down by the voters. I do think that's important. And I also think if we do decide to use urban renewal, I do believe it needs to go to the voters, but I would still support the motion as it's written now.
Chris?
Thank you. Claire said a lot of what I was going to say, so that can helpfully shorten it. I also agree. This keeps all of the options on the table. And I don't want to say only these options are acceptable to me and these aren't. I want to hear about all of them and how they might be used to best effect, even if it involves cobbling, not cobbling, whatever. So this allows us to do that, and I like that. We as a council have talked a lot about the fact that any action we take never binds a future council who can make an exact opposite decision if they so choose. And it's up to that council at some future date in their wisdom to decide if they want to do that or not. The only way as a council we are bound is if it's in the charter. Beyond that, we can change anything else, and we certainly have the authority and in some cases the duty to change actions of previous councils if we so choose. I'm not saying you do that willy-nilly or you do it just at the drop of a hat or when it's convenient. I think you think before you do it, but if it's necessary to do, then you do it. No action we take ever binds a future council. And the 2010 City Council, and I was a member of that City Council, it was my intention at the time to say, yeah, I'm at the time here in 2010, if we can do these things and end it, that's fine with me. But am I bound by the 2010 City Councilor because I'm now a 2016 councilor? And I'm on a 2016 council, and we have to make decisions in 2016, not 2010. And so I don't remember Bibles. I don't remember crossing myself or killing a chicken or making anything solemn. I remember an intent, which I intended to do, but this is 2016, and times may have changed. And I definitely want to be open-minded. I'm not going to do, as I said before, urban renewal district just because it's easy or convenient, which actually it is. But I want to have it on the table. I want to be able to consider it and not somehow say that I am somehow tied up and bound by what a council did in 2010. This isn't 2010, and I'm no longer that councilor. I'm this councilor. And what I intended to do in 2010, I sincerely intended to do. But if I drove a car for 5 years and said I'm not going to spend one more dime on it, and then it has a flat tire, and I could spend $50 to get a tire and be back on the road, no, I made a solemn promise I would not spend one more dime on this car. Sometimes things change. Sometimes situations are different. So I can honor what I did in 2010, and I can still be who I am in 2016. So I'm not buying into the notion that somehow the council is bound by what a previous council did. We are always making new decisions for new times and new situations.
Alan?
Yeah, I'd like to explore the private funding options a bit. The logical private funding entity, of course, is our telecom companies that are here. Maybe you can answer a couple questions if you know. Why haven't they stepped up so far to fund this project? It seems logical. Don't they believe it has a payback? And secondly, do they have any plans to build this project?
I think some of the existing larger providers could do it today, but it would be at the cost of the users. So I think you could actually technically get gigabit service from one of the large providers currently, but the monthly cost would be very high because there's not enough users in the market, in this market, in the smaller markets, to justify, the cost of putting the cable in the ground and the monthly fees that they pay to telecom tax fees and so forth. So is it doable technically? Yes. Does it make sense for them? No. My sense is if there was a lot of money to be made, they would have done it a long time ago. So bigger markets maybe, but that kind of gigabit speed is not landing in smaller markets.
So because the downtown customer base would be too small, it would be too expensive.
Justify the cost of putting it in the right of way and so forth.
So what we're advocating for is actually democratic socialism of this funding mechanism, I suspect. Right, Mike? Thanks. Essentially what we're doing is we're spreading the cost around the whole city to pay for this public infrastructure. Parks SDCs, how much is available from that? For the downtown, for the park block stuff, not for fiber.
It's not a number I have right now.
But how much is in the fund? It's millions, right?
We may provide it.
We'll try to do a little research while you're continuing.
Yeah, I don't have that on top of my head. It might have been in previous material, but.
In the farmer's market, $500,000. What happens to that money if the downtown urban renewal district were to expire? Does it still remain available to fund the farmer's market stuff?
So the district doesn't actually expire. It's the tax increment that we lose. And so the money still is there. The Urban Renewal Agency can still choose to spend it, but only for that purpose. If you ever decide to actually terminate the downtown urban renewal district, then the money, I'll have to double check, but I think the money may get returned to the county.
And then we dispersed as per the formula, and we get a portion of it.
Correct. But I'd want to double check on that.
So if we don't terminate the district, then the money remains available to do the farmer's market.
Correct.
Hi. So the January 20th agenda item included a description of Parks SDC funding, and in that material there was it mentioned that there is about $1 million in the balance under the reimbursement fees, and that those fees were programmed to be spent on several different projects that were listed. Those projects all would have a higher priority ranking in the SDC projects than anything in the downtown would have.
That was unallocated Park SDCs, right?
This is
that $1 million. 'Cause there's a lot more than that in Park SDC monies.
Unappropriated fund balance.
Unappropriated.
Right. So, and then there was a list of the projects that would potentially be used, those projects would be used for, which all would have a higher priority ranking than the downtown
And
parks.
who did the priority ranking? Council.
I'm not sure. I do not. Oh, yeah, it was a council resolution.
2006.
Council resolution, 2007, yes.
Well, not this council, but another council.
That one back then.
So I'm a little bit still unclear about the motion. Is the motion for the city manager to bring back all forms of funding mechanisms, including downtown urban renewal district extension, or the reason I'm asking is, on what staff's interpretation of this motion, the reason I'm asking is if we need to amend it to be specific about what other forms we want you to look at, then we could do that.
So my understanding of the friendly amendment was that the manager would bring back his recommendations for other funding options. As one of the staff who might wind up working on this, it would be very helpful that if there are some funding mechanisms that a majority of you do not support, it would be great if you let us know that today so we don't spend time working on those as possibilities. If you don't know that yet, then I'm assuming that staff would look at all of the funding mechanisms and bring back a recommendation. But the way I understand the friendly amendment, it's not to do further analysis on every single possible option and bring back more information about every single possible option. Instead, it's to bring back a recommended funding strategy.
And in order to do that, we'd need to carefully pull together a package of funding sources, so it would come from a lot of different places. So, for instance, levy, grants, private funds, telecom, and general funds should the urban renewal district.
Well, it could, but again, the motion, as I understand it, and it's your motion, so you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, is not that we bring back a recommended strategy that includes every possible funding option, but instead it's bring back your recommended strategy, which could be, and I know it won't be, and this is why I'm going to use this one, it could be we are going to privately fund the entire fiber build-out, and that's our recommended strategy. So if there are particular types of funding mechanisms that you actually want to have included, then I would suggest that you make that part of the motion, because at the moment, it's staff will look at all of the different options and bring back a recommended strategy.
The only, I would say yes to all of that. So it seems like there's two parts. One is if you fund it with urban renewal, this is how that works. The other is here's a recommended strategy without urban renewal to get there. And my one caution would be is to not spend too much time trying to figure out yes or no which ones everybody's agreed to or not agreed to. And so that's why I would suggest maybe not spending too much time on saying, do we have a majority that want this type or not this type? Because we could be here all night. And we haven't actually looked at all of those strategies ourselves. And so I think it would be greater if we had flexibility. And, of course, when we bring it back, there would be conversations on which you choose to or not choose to.
So I'll make an amendment to also bring back a package of non-urban renewal funding to include levies, grants, private funding, telecom, and general fund.
Any combination of those. It may or may not be.
Not that has to be all of those.
Not limited to urban renewal.
But any combination.
So does that, are we looking for a decision between between urban renewal being part of the package or not being part of the package right now?
No.
Because yours is not that, right?
But wanted specifically to be brought back a package that didn't include urban renewal.
I know, I'm just...
Right, which
could be comprised
which we
of those.
assume that would be how we would.
Well, then Glenn said, I'm not sure what you guys meant, so I put forward a list.
And John is sure.
So
I'm glad you clarified it.
All right. Then if that's your understanding, then I'll withdraw.
Yeah, we're not assuming that you've agreed, if you pass a motion, that you've agreed to move forward on urban renewal. The motion doesn't say you're moving forward on urban renewal. It says you're directing us to bring back the plan to include urban renewal, but also this other option that includes non-urban renewal sources to accomplish the same goals.
Good.
That's how we would take that.
With that understanding, I'm
Okay,
okay
George
with
Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I worked up a list and playing around with the numbers, and I think it's feasible. Or something very similar to this is feasible. It's cobbled together from many different sources. I'm using staff's figure of $4 million. First off, I think that a full faith and credit bond is the way to go, but you have to back it up to, that way it's not any tax increase for anybody. It's not a levy. It's not a GO bond. It's the city's full faith and credit. The city's used it before for several worthy projects. And it wouldn't even necessarily be for $4 million, because if we're successful applying for the state grant, that's $500,000. 100 jobs have to be created in 5 years as a result of that grant. Surely, if we extended high-speed fiber optic downtown, 100 jobs would be created in 5 years. That's 20 jobs a year. What I've heard from the tech community, that would not be a problem. We're totally eligible for that grant. there's a federal grant from the Commerce Department up to $1,250,000. I believe that we're eligible for that grant. Chattanooga, by way of comparison, in 2010, I believe it was, 2009, got a $111 million grant from the Energy Department. Okay, so if you knock off $1,750,000 from $4 million, that still leaves $2.25 million. And then we sunset the Downtown Urban Renewal District. $1 million a year goes to the general fund. We could take $250,000 of that each year for 4 years to help pay off the bond. That leaves $750,000 for all the other people that are going to be lining up to use that money. And I personally think that a significant chunk should be spent on homelessness and the Housing First model. But that's for debate with the Budget Committee. We're probably going to have close to $1 million in increased property tax revenues from all the buildings that are coming online and paying taxes now. That's going to go into the general fund. Same thing. You could take $250,000 of that, leaving $750,000. Do that for 4 years to pay off the bond. That's $1 million. The balance is 2.25 minus $2 million. Now we're down to $250,000. Surely that can the Riverfront Urban Renewal District can pay for a portion of the fiber optic project. And just looking at the map, I'm guessing it's 5%. So 5% would be about $225,000 would come from the Riverfront Urban Renewal District, give or take. I mean, these are not exact figures, obviously. The SILT funds, we could take $1,000 a year from SILT. That's $400,000 for the 4-year period of the bond. Property owners, I feel, should pay something. I'm willing to. If our building gets connected. We don't even own the building, but I'm willing to pay for that service if it's reasonable and not onerous, and that could be paid over a 5-year period by the actual property owners. And then there's telecom funds. How about $25,000 a year times 4? That's $100,000. The bond is paid off. There's money left over. I mean, some of these figures would be adjusted downward, and that is a way to fund the fiber optic project.
Thanks, George. Did you get through your list?
I pretty much got through my list, but I'd like another round.
Okay. Claire.
Thank you. Thanks for going through your information, George. It's really, really helpful. I had a question for staff. In our packet, the estimate is that if the Urban Renewal District is allowed to sunset or end, that would see a return of approximately $1 million into the general fund. So 2 questions there. Is that assuming that we keep the $500,000 project for the farmers market? I see a head nod behind you.
Yes. I mean, the million, that doesn't change the $1 million a year figure.
Okay, that's not, it doesn't impact that figure. And then how recent is this analysis that led you to the $1 million figure?
This analysis is based on current tax year data, so FY16 data.
And is there any change in the value, the taxable value of the properties within that district once it expires? Does anything change in terms of their tax rate or how their property is appraised?
No.
Okay. Sorry. That's it. Thanks.
George?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'd kind of like to go, there are 2 things here. I'd like to go back to this $500,000 that's in the current plan for the farmers market improvements. It's my understanding that once all of the outstanding debt is paid off, and that's going to happen at the end of the year?
That's when it's projected, yes.
Yes. That, and there's no other debt that's been assumed. Any funds left in the balance of the district go back to the county tax assessor for redivision to the jurisdictions. In other words, if all the debt's paid off, any money left over has to go back. I mean, I've read the ORS It's pretty clear.
When the district actually terminates, then the assets and liabilities either go to the city, or in the case of tax increment, that would get returned. You're, I think, thinking about debt as here's a bond that's outstanding, we have paid off the bond. The way debt is used in urban renewal statutes, it's really what would fall into the definition of maximum indebtedness. And so the plan including that we can spend $500,000 on the farmer's market means that $500,000 continues to be available for the farmer's market. If the council decides, acting as the urban renewal agency, that you are not going to spend that money on the farmer's market, at that point, that project goes away, so there's no longer that piece of the maximum indebtedness, and so at that point, the $500,000 would go back to the county to get dispersed out. But when the tax increment goes away, that doesn't mean that the dollars still allocated toward some project in the plan go back to the county. They wouldn't. They would stay here until either they're spent for that project or until you decide you're not going to do that project.
I contest that view. I don't think that's correct, with all due respect. Does $500,000 in addition to the debt payments for the other two projects, does that actually exist in the fund? I think it's actually clear when the district, when all the debt's paid off, and by the way, manager and staff have had 5.5 years to figure out how to spend that $500,000 for, and we too, because we are the Urban Renewal Board, besides being city council. We have had 5.5 years to figure that out. We have not done so. And it's my understanding that if we're going to do anything, it's got to be done before the end, December 31st, because that's when it all kind of goes away. And if there's any money left in there, it's supposed to go back to the county tax assessor for redivision back to the jurisdictions. But I just wanted to say that I don't know, 5.5 years and there's still no plan. I haven't seen any drawings or anything. All right. One other thing I want to mention is, and I have a feeling that probably a lot of people in this room aren't even aware of it, and lots of people that are watching this proceeding, when the Downtown Urban Renewal District sunsets, people are going to get a tax break. You go home and go to your file cabinet and pull out your property tax statement. You will see on there, under general government purposes, you will see that everybody that lives in the city of Eugene is paying a sum, $15 to $30 or more, depending on the value of your property, to the Downtown Urban Renewal District and to the Riverfront Urban Renewal District. When the district goes away, that's going to inject hundreds of thousands of dollars back into the local economy because people will be paying less taxes. So
I've asked Sue just to at least expound on that a little bit.
Sure.
Two things. One thing is urban renewal, in theory, doesn't change anybody's tax bill. It moves money from one line on the tax bill to another line on the tax bill. So if all else were equal, there would be no change in anybody's taxes due to urban renewal terminating. The impact from the termination of tax increment collections on the schools would mean that there are, I think it was 841 properties that would go into compression as a result. And so for those properties, there could be actually a slight tax decrease, right? Because instead of their money moving from one category to the other, only so much of it can move back into the schools category, and then they're maxed out under the Measure 5 tax rate cap. So there would be a few properties or a few hundred properties for which there could be a tax decrease. I don't know how much that would be.
Okay, thank you for that. But I'm not talking about schools. I'm talking about the $30 that I pay every year to the Downtown Urban Renewal District. You're saying that just gets switched to another government category?
Yes.
Which one does it go to?
So if you look at the chart that was in your packet, that basically shows you what happened. So it shows you that the $2 million that the Urban Renewal District is currently getting would get redistributed to these other taxing districts. So if Urban Renewal weren't in place, so to use the city as an example, the city's permanent tax rate is just a hair over $7 per thousand of assessed value. But Urban Renewal actually takes a piece of that tax rate and moves it out of the city's tax rate and into the Urban Renewal tax rate. So if Urban Renewal goes away, it gets moved back to the city's tax rate, and that happens with each of the overlapping.
But you're
taxes.
saying it would be transferred back to the city?
Correct.
Line.
That's
All
how
right.
the city gets more money in its general fund.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So I want to, I've got Mike and, is that who I have?
Yep.
Yes. But I did want to say all of us are very entitled, and actually more than entitled, to our opinions. But I did want to say about the farmers market that we've had the money there and been working with the farmers market pretty continually to try to come to something that they want and are ready to do. And every piece hinges on another piece, which hinges on another piece. And so we have been watching the things, sort of the county make their moves to get us make our moves and try to get everything ready. And the farmers market is a piece of all of that. And so it's been in play all this time. It's just it's not been quite ripe yet. And it's not quite ripe yet right now. In fact, farmers market has made a choice not to use that money because they weren't ready to use that money. So, Mike, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Denny. And I'm not really sure how to phrase it even now, and I'm not sure how to ask it. I'm probably going to mess it up. I'm going to try, though. Because I want to understand how staff works on this outside of the light of council. I want to understand what you guys do when you're typically doing economic development activities and how you process and think about the jobs that we're talking about. Because obviously you've wanted to see this in place just as long as anybody at this table has, if not more. And getting this done quickly matters, and you know that. We talked about that. And not doing it quickly has consequences. I spoke with an old friend the other day. I hadn't talked to him in a while. And he's adamantly a hater of the Urban Renewal District. And he's an adamant hater of MUPTI and every other kind of tax increment financing there is, and or any kind of tool that we might use at this table. And I don't blame him. I mean, man's entitled to his opinion. That's great. But the reason, I mean, we sat and talked about it. The reason he doesn't like those things is because he feels like we're selling ourselves short. His feeling about it is that we have the greatest place in the world, and we should be asking people to step up and participate, to pay a premium to be a part of our community. If we're going to develop 17 acres of the most beautiful land in the entire world, we should be charging a super premium, because that's one of the only places in the country you could do that. And I have to say, I thought he had a point. And so, why is it that we seem to need to do incentives in this case, like urban renewal, for a project that seems like a no-brainer that so many people want to do? Help me understand that better, will you please?
I think generally the answer is usually the incentives are used in cases where the private market isn't able to deliver what we in the community want. So in the case of MUPTI, we want downtown to be focused on with housing and smart growth and all those things, but the market isn't able to deliver that for whatever reason. It doesn't pencil out, so we step in and try to make something happen in the absence of market conditions that make sense. I think that's the same with the fiber equation. We're stepping in. We want to create this vibrant downtown innovation district. We've made investments in infrastructure and LTD and libraries and LCC and RAIN, and there's a big disconnect right now. We have really, really below standard fiber speeds that can help support that industry. So, and it's our sense that because the market isn't delivering itself, we need to step in and at least make it happen downtown for now, and over time see if we can make that grow. Or over time, maybe the market will step up and Google Fiber will be everywhere. But it's not here. It's not here now, and we need it. It's really something we need to make the market competitive, those tech companies competitive globally, because there are definitely other places in the country and in the world where they have access to speeds that we don't have.
It seems to me as though, and I appreciate your answer, it seems to me as though this is about speed and time. In a lot of those cases where it's not that the market doesn't work or the market's dysfunctional, it's that we are entering the market by means of the regulations that we set and the expectations that we set of folks in the market. And if we want the results we want to happen at the pace we want them to happen, then these things become necessary parts of that equation. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, I think we want to accelerate the opportunity. We've created, I think, a tremendous opportunity with all of this momentum you see in the tech sector. I mean, the Oregonian is writing about Eugene and the growing tech sector.
Right.
It's happening, and there's a moment, I think, now to take advantage of it, and that's what we're doing. And we could wait 2 or 3 or 5 years for Google Fiber to come, and it may or may not come. And so I think we're trying to accelerate the opportunity via this investment. Yeah.
So the answer to my friend then might be that, well, that's a great idea, and the market will probably do that if we did that, but it'd take us so long we'd miss a bunch of opportunities we need.
That is the theory, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, and then Chris, and then George.
Yeah, so I agree. The high-speed fiber project is one that should happen relatively soon because we're missing opportunities and creating family wage jobs with that money and potentially benefiting the whole city. Could we also please clarify with a legal opinion, if necessary, about what happens to the $500,000 of the farmers market without an extension of the urban renewal district, please? And if I understood what Sue said correctly, is that if the downtown urban renewal district tax increment stops, we don't do an extension, the taxes don't go down, they just get redistributed within the taxing districts. The big winner being the Eugene City General Fund, about $1 million plus, and then some small adjustments for other folks, but the big loser would be 4J School District to the tune of about $340,000 less funding. So if the urban renewal district goes away, 4J actually ends up getting less money, which is a weird, perverse outcome, but that's the way the math works.
That's correct.
Because of
State school funding formula.
because of the state funding issues.
And the other thing I would say is that for those properties that go into schools compression as a result of urban renewal going away, that the total drop in taxes from that across the city would be about $500,000 for 841 property owners.
What was that? I didn't say that again.
$500,000. That would be lower taxes for about 841 property owners.
Would that make the $1 million general fund be $500,000? No. It would just be overall there'd be a $500,000 less paid in taxes.
Right. So the chart that you had in your packet was the...
This chart?
Yes.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Chris?
Just quickly, something that Mike mentioned, which I think is an extremely important point in the context of this as an economic development decision, is I can recall back in the 80s when Eugene was in a position to say, we don't have to do anything, we're so pretty, everyone's going to come and want to dance with us. Mm-hmm. And we wound up sitting by the side waiting for people to come and dance with us because they don't come and dance with us because we're pretty. If we want business and we want jobs, they don't come here because we have nice trees and stuff like that, quality of life. That's an add-on. That's an additional incentive, all things being equal. But they come here because they can find workers who are going to be able to do the job they want. They're going to be able to find ways to move products in and out. They're going to be able to find ways to manufacture their products with the resources and access to materials they need. It's cut and dried kind of stuff. And we, therefore, have to be able to provide that stuff. And it takes money to provide that kind of stuff. And I have talked to a lot of potential businesses, both locally who wanted to grow and people who wanted to come here. And their questions are not around how nice are your trees or how pretty are your parks. Their questions are around, do you have a building where I can get access to transportation and where I can find electricity and high-speed internet and I can find workers who are going to be able to do the job I want? Those are the things we need to provide. It is not the function of the city to create jobs. It is the function of the city to provide a fertile environment where business grows jobs. And if we don't provide that fertile environment, jobs will not grow. And so the whole conversation we're having, we want to keep reminding ourselves what's the point, whether it's tax increment financing or anything else. What's the point? And the point is we want to create the fertile environment where jobs will grow. And it will not be fertile unless we have high-speed internet, buildings where people can work. The Broadway Commerce Building is the perfect example. Downtown didn't get pretty because we did something. Downtown got pretty because we did something to help business, and then business helped downtown to become pretty. That's the way that mechanism has to work. So we have to take a firm hand in the right direction. And so the direction we need to take is, what do we need to do to create that fertile ground? And I think this investment, whether it's with tax increment or not, but the investment in fiber is critical to growing jobs. And whatever else we can think of as add-ons that will help to do that as well, I think is critically important if we want economic development. But for us to think it's just going to happen because we're pretty, there's a lot of pretty places, and we have to also have the infrastructure to make it work. So that's going to take money and effort. And so I appreciate that coming up, because we can never sit back and just say, oh, we don't have to provide tools, we don't have to provide incentives. Yeah, we do. If you want to grow jobs, you have to be willing to use the fertilizer to make them grow.
Let's see, chickens, fertilizer.
It's all farming metaphor.
All the metaphors tonight. If a cartoonist was watching, holy cow.
I just would add to the comments that were made that, we struggled with our downtown for 40 years.
Yes.
There wasn't a quick take-up on that deal, so it took some work to make it happen. George Brown, and then we're going to vote.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a few questions, and I'm going back to the information packet from January 20th. It's just about the fiber network. So eWeb will own the fiber, and they will lease to internet service providers. It says eWeb's lease rates will cover the maintenance and replacement costs. There is no markup for profits. I'm wondering why that is the case. It seems like a modest profit of even 2 or 3 percentage points would help pay for the system and be beneficial for eWeb, too.
I can't speak totally to what eWeb's motive there is, but I think the whole idea behind the pilot program was to keep the costs down for the end users and have it be an economic development tool. Again, you might be able to access that kind of speed today, but you would pay an arm and a leg to get it. So the whole goal of the fiber was to make it competitive, meaning there'd be more than 1 or 2 providers, that it would be more competitive, and that fiber could be leased by small providers, large providers, and to keep the costs down. So that is part of the strategy. I think in the long term, eWeb benefits with economic development, because those users are going to access services through eWeb, power, and so forth. So it's possible that they're looking at it as a way to grow the community that will help them long term, but I'm not sure exactly why or why not. I think they're trying to look at this as an economic development tool like we are.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Maybe that question is better directed at the eWeb board than our guys. Well, in 2010, the city was just talking with Google and filled out requests for information, because Google was thinking about establishing a fiber optic system in Eugene. I got this from an online tech thing from the U of O. Do you know any history about that?
I don't. I know that Google's looking at various cities, most of which are at a much larger scale than we are. It's some of the larger metro areas in the country. I think we're a second or third tier kind of city as far as size. We haven't had any discussions with Google in any time recently that I recall, and I wasn't.
This was in
involved
2010. They're definitely
wasn't involved. I don't have any recollection.
I
It
see.
was not something
All right.
we were involved
Well,
in.
I can write out my question a little more fully and send it in. Somebody's got to remember that. I just was wondering what happened. Why didn't we? What happened with they were going to have a contract with Google and they were going to provide it, and then that went away. All right. Yeah, Google's installing a system in Austin, Texas, and Provo, Utah, Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri, and they're going to be offering free service to poor households, totally free, 100 megabit, I think. Anyway, I see on one of the pages it says the engineering plan and cost estimate are preliminary. The planning team will reach out to key stakeholders, including building owners and ISPs, this winter to review the plan. The engineering plan may change, which will subsequently affect the cost estimate. So I'm wondering, has that happened? What are the internet service providers and the building owners saying? And has the engineering plan changed?
I'm sorry, I don't. What that reference was from, what time period that you were reading from, I'm not sure, but we've been working very closely with Alcog and eWeb on the engineering plan, and so we're utilizing their expertise as far as the cost estimates. I think the plan is well thought out as far as where we can go and where's the electrical conduit and so forth. We'll probably have some adjustments along the way, because like any other project, you'll discover some things along the way, and we discovered a lot and learned a lot during the pilot. So, but I think we have a good plan. We still need to do some outreach to the property owners. I think that's one of the things I think you mentioned that I think would be a next step, but I think we would do that at the point where we have a plan and we have at least some ideas regarding where we're going with funding and feasibility.
Well, good. I think council would like to hear the results of the discussions with the internet service providers and the building owners. And then finally, my last question regarding the plan itself is the actual feasibility needs to be justified. I'm talking about the middle mile solution, connection. The actual feasibility needs to be justified before the investment is made. The city and its partners, Alcog and TAO, should prepare a careful business plan of the options. This plan would aim to secure pledges of purchases from other public agencies and local ISPs. Has this been done?
There's still some work to be done in that regard. There is a lot of players, the school districts and the county and the city, and so getting everyone on board and understand what's the benefits to all of those before we make that investment. But some of that initial work's been done. We think there's some strong benefit not only to those users but to the whole community. But we still have a little bit more work to do in that regard to truth that.
Well, there again, I see it's ongoing, and council should see the business plan once it's drawn up. Thank you.
Could you read the motion, and then we'll vote?
I move to direct the city manager to prepare for council discussion a draft of an amendment to the downtown urban renewal plan. The draft amendment should include as possible projects: 1, high-speed fiber; 2, downtown parks blocks / open spaces; 3, a year-round farmers market; and 4, redevelopment of the LCC building. The manager also shall bring back a recommendation for a package of non-urban renewal funding options.
Okay. Ready to vote? All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in opposition. 2, it passes. We're going to quickly do the consent calendar for this evening.
That page. I move to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. None in opposition. It passes. Thank you. We will return at 7:30.